So you might remember back in 3.11 Harvest League that I made a build called the Stone Golem Elementalist. Now this was a build that was capable of doing all the content without spending too much money on it. It has a very easy AFK type playstyle, tons of regeneration, tons of defensive layers, and it originally was an answer to my issue with minion builds. Now there are two parts to my issues with minion builds. One is that they aren't exactly the most enjoyable playstyle. You're essentially playing a support character for all of your minions, and two, they simply just don't really teach you how to play the game properly. That was my second issue with them. Now back in 3.11 when Harvest League was in full swing, this build worked perfectly fine. So it's been quite a while and I kind of wanted to give it a revamp. So I decided that we would be working on a new series and kind of giving you some insight into what happens when I actually test these builds over at my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/bigducks, which you should go follow by the way. How we work through these builds, how we test them, all of the different things that go into the process of getting these build guides ready and together. Because sometimes the builds don't actually make it all the way to a full build guide, but I still want you guys over here on YouTube to get the experience of what these builds are and just kind of get like some insight into maybe a build that you'd really like to play, but I just didn't feel was good enough for, you know, a full guide. So as for the workshop series, what we're going to be doing in these videos is we're going to be going through builds, we're going to be trying them at different levels of investment, and just see if it's actually worth it to spend all of this currency on a build. We will be going anywhere from a very low budget of 1 Exalt total all the way up to 20 plus Exalts for a lot of these builds. Now some of them might not make it there, and some may make it even further. So let's start talking about the Stone Golem Elementalist. So starting with the budget level of 1 Exalt. Due to Gwenin, among other things this league, the jewels that this build typically uses are extremely cheap. Most of the primordial jewels are not that expensive right now because Elementalist got nerfed from a standpoint of like the Burning Arrow Golementalist, and that side of the Elementalist got nerfed pretty hard, so most of the actual items for this build have gone way down in price. So for the budget of about 1 Exalt, all that we really need are some random cheap rares to fill in all of the pieces that aren't unique. We need the jewels, there's quite a few of them, as well as 2 Cold Iron points, a Primordial Chain Necklace, and the Breath Stealer Gloves. Now, as I said before, this is only currently in this budget level because of how low the cost of the unique jewels are, and it is a solid build for working into low tier red maps, but it will suffer from either a lack of damage or a lack of defenses later on. Investing into both at the same time is expensive, as we will get into. Moving into the lower investment, which is going to be around 5 Exalt, this allows us to get a crafted +1 active skill gems chest piece, as well as some life and life percentage on it. We can either get a crafted life percentage belt or a Darkness Enthroned with 2 nice Abyss jewels in it, and then we are also adding in the cluster jewels. Now, most of the time, the minion cluster jewels can be very expensive. You're just looking to get the best nodes that you can manage, like Renewal, Feasting Fiends, any of the crit-based nodes. Primordial Bond is good for a defensive node, but it doesn't actually give us any real golem damage. Now, personally, I feel like the build hits its peak usefulness at this point. This is where you're going to get the most out of your currency, is right around 5 Exalt. So for a skilled player, it can handle tier 16 maps, and it can kill most bosses in the game while still feeling fun to play. The problem is that due to the recent changes that happened in 3.15, the damage simply isn't enough anymore for people who can't dodge boss abilities easily or don't know their way around moving and, you know, executing a minion build properly. The next step in investment is going to be mid-tier investment. This is around 10 Exalt. Now in this step, we're going to be getting a crafted +1 strength, +1 fizz amulet. It's going to be the vast majority of the money, as well as like some Volnon hit rings and maybe optimize our rares a little bit more. Now, the bulk of the cost here is upgrading the amulet, and this is the point where you're going to start wanting to considering specters. However, the problem is that the specters won't stay alive without significantly more investment. This was the wall that I ran into that made me decide that I don't think the build is really in that great of a place right now, but if you do push on, it does get a little bit better. Now, I personally don't feel like the build gains very much from this particular upgrade, but it is necessary to be able to move forward, as the significant damage boost here is only going to come from the specters, and we cannot use them with the primordial chain. It prevents any other minions from being summoned. Now, moving on into the high investment, this is getting up close to 20 Exalt on the build. This is where we're going to be moving over towards a specter swap, as well as maybe an animated guardian. Now, the goal here is to be able to get a specter and have it survive, and the main way that you do this nowadays is you need to get that specter gem up to a worthwhile level. For the purposes of this build, we are looking to get to level 25 Raised Spectre. This allows us to have 3 specters and gives it enough tankiness that it doesn't just die at any stiff breeze that, you know, comes our way. To do this, we're going to need a +3 minion gems helmet with minion life also in the link. We're going to need a pair of +1 specter boots with solid resistances and movement speed. This build doesn't have a lot of room for good movement speed, so movement speed on your boots is going to be very important. we're going to need the level 21 raised Spectre Gem, and at this point we're going to be optimizing our rings and our belt and getting better jewels for the Darkness Enthroned if that's what you're using, and so on and so forth. Now, the build starts to feel good again at this point, and this is where my build currently is. We're going to jump into game here in a little bit, and I'm going to show you the build itself at this level. But the problem is that at this point, you're kind of sacrificing the gameplay feel and the reasons that I think that this build was fun previously. Now, with the addition of Spectres, we have to move our anoints around and parts of the trees to be able to maintain these Spectres' resistances. For the Golems, they're extremely tanky just by nature, and they resummon themselves when they die due to our Ascendancy, so we don't have to worry about their defenses at all. But the Spectres themselves, without obtaining level 25 of the Spectre Gem, they're pretty much dying constantly. I could not keep them alive until I got them to level 25, and I had the minion helmet link the minion life in it, so I could put all of the other links in there as well. Now, of note, when you do get to level 25 on the Spectre Gem, this does allow you to get a third Spectre. Now, originally when I was just doing 2 Spectres, we were doing 2 Carnage Chieftains that were providing us Frenzy charges. This is the big buff to damage that I was talking about before, as Frenzy charges on minions, especially all 5 of our Stone Golems, is very, very powerful here. With a third Spectre, we can get a Host Chieftain, which will start to give us power charges. Now at this point, you can start scaling more into crit, but unfortunately that is going to get insanely expensive, and I don't necessarily think that it's worth it. All of that being said, the damage increase is not so substantial that I would call this amount of investment worthwhile. This level of investment is going to be for enthusiasts of Stone Golems and people who just really want to play this specific archetype, and I think that if you're going to try this build and give it a shot, that you should really be stopping it around the 5 Exalt range. Just the point where you've got the cluster jewels, you've got most of the normal primordial jewels, you're still using the amulet, and you haven't invested a ton of money into this. Get a 6 link, and that's about all that you really should do. Now, beyond this, there is a further level that you can obtain, and it involves swapping to a Necromancer and scaling the Golems as converted cold damage. You can do Hatred scaling, and you would use the gloves that allow you to convert all of your damage to cold. Ultimately, this would be way more powerful, but if you're going to go through all of the trouble of attempting to cold scale minions and go the Necromancer, I feel that the build just loses all of its main purpose and goal, because a Spectre setup would just simply outperform this at any level of gear. You would need the Triad grips I spoke about before, you'd need some minion wands and a whole bunch of crazy expensive gear, and you could get way more out of that level of gear by just going Spectres. So now that you've got an idea of what all it took to get this build rolling, let's go ahead and jump into the game so you can see the character, and we'll take a little bit of a closer look. Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, if you're new or part of the large percentage of people who are still not subscribed to this YouTube channel, make sure that you do that so that these videos will show right up in your feed, and also if you enjoy the content, make sure that you like the video. Now, when it comes to the Stone Golemancer that you've heard me talk about, all the investment levels and everything earlier on in the video, this is a build that I did really enjoy at one point in time. And we have spent a pretty decent amount of money and amount of time and effort trying to get this build up to a point where it seems like it's good. Now, as I said before, I think the 2 levels of investment where this build really does shine is at 5 Exalt invested. That's around the point where I don't think it's worth much more to put into it. And then once again, at around 15 to 20, it starts to feel good again. This build that you see right here is at around the 15 Exalt invested. I'm going to quickly go over the gear and the skills that I use, as well as all the gems and things like that, just real quick so that you can see what's going on. There will be a path of building that is linked down below if you want to just see what this character is, but keep in mind, these are not full build guides. It's not going to have the full quality path of building like I normally do. I'm going to save that for the full build guides. Now, quickly going over the gear. We use 2 cold iron points to scale the level of physical spell gems. That is the main way that we're trying to scale the Golem's damage. We have +3 from one, +3 from another, +2 from our amulet, as well as +1 from the chest piece. Now, when these say deal no elemental damage, that just does mean us. So our Golems and our minions and everything can deal elemental damage, but we don't really worry too much about that. Now, starting from the top down, we are using a +3 and minion life helmet. This is for the Spectres. I will get to the Spectres in a moment, and we will talk about this in depth, but this is mainly just an investment to keep our Spectres alive. Moving down to the +1/+1 amulet, this was what we replaced our primordial chain with. While it was a big upgrade in damage, and when I say big, it's like a 20% upgrade in damage, and so this is very expensive. This was close to 5 Exalt to create, and we didn't even get life on it. I made this myself. I had to buy both of the bases as well as Awakener Orbit together, and then I apply the aspect of the spider. It's good, but I don't know that it's worthwhile in this build to spend spend that much money when you can simply just use the Primordial Chain. However, if you want the Spectres, you can't use the Primordial Chain because this prevents you from having any other non-golem minions. The next thing is going to be the chest piece. We crafted this. I'll show you the fossil combination that we used. If you go and use a potent chaotic resonator with, I think that it is metallic as well as pristine fossil, that makes it so that we get more lightning, more life, no physical, and no defense modifiers. It makes it quite easy to roll these just +1 and big life chest pieces, as well as some resistances. We got super lucky on this roll because we got strength, a decent life roll, as well as the fire and cold resistance. Now this could have been potentially a little bit better, but it is what it is. We got a good enough one here with some big resistance rolls that made things easier. As for the rings, this is just a random ring that I alteration rolled. You could obviously do better than this. Vulnerability on hit is very nice. It just gives us an easy way to apply our curse. Then we also do have this ring. I just hit this with the minion movement speed essences. It's nothing special. Moving on, we do have breast stealers. This is an item that I wasn't honestly too familiar with. I had never used it before, and I saw a couple people in PoE Ninja using it for this particular build, and it seemed kind of interesting. You'll see more of this when I do a map example here in a few minutes, but this essentially just gives you a bunch of little totems that have auras on them anytime that you kill a rare. It allows you to have an additional anoint as well. You can see that we have Ravenous Horde as well as Indomitable Army. This is a belt that uses the same exact combo that we used before. The metallic pristine just gets us a percentage life belt with a bunch of life on it, and hopefully we get some like reduced flash charges used among other things. We got relatively lucky with this. Good regeneration, decent stats in general, quite a bit of life. And then the +1 Spectre gems, boots. I bought these. You need good movement speed, +1 to level low raise Spectres, some resist, and some life. Now let's talk about the Spectres here. So in the lower version of the build, you're not using Spectres at all. However, the problem that I ran into with this build in particular was keeping the Spectres alive. Now, I was like, well, we can just use that ring. I don't remember what the name of it is. The one where you can like have it eat gems and just have it eat a whole bunch of gems and then slot the Spectre into it. I was like, well, we can do that, and then I can maybe do like an Animate Guardian in the helmet, but that seemed a little bit too involved, and I really don't like, I think it's called the Hungry Loop. I really don't like using that because it's such a pain to set up, so we just set up a +3 minion life helmet. We're currently using a level 21 raised Spectre, as well as Meat Shield, Elemental Army, and Life Tap. Now, what I could do here is I could replace Meat Shield with Animated Guardian. That would be very good to do. You'd have to gear up your Animate Guardian, and there's the chance that it might die, and you might lose all that gear. I didn't want to deal with that. I really don't like Animated Guardians. I think it's a lame concept. I don't like pseudo-hardcore mechanics in my softcore, thank you very much. So we just stuck with Meat Shield. The Spectres don't die that often. It's pretty much only like big chaos damage, as well as maybe Cirrus and bosses like that really kill them at this point. But we had to get a level 21 raised Spectre, a +3 helmet, as well as a +1 to level of all raised Spectre gems to get our Spectres to level 25, which gives us our third Spectre, as well as gives us enough actual base life on the Spectres that they don't die. Now, as for the Spectres I'm using, it's pretty classic support Spectres. These are Carnage Chieftains, which provide us Frenzy charges, as well as a single Host Chieftain, which is going to provide us power charges. These are just the best offensive stats that we can realistically get out of a Spectre, and they're very, very good for the Stone Golems. Now, I talked about all of the actual items we're using. Let's talk about some of the skills. Now, we do have our actual golems. We've got our stone golems as well as our chaos golems. Thanks to our ascendancy, we really don't have to worry about these at all. You summon them once and then you never worry about them again. Liege of the Primordial makes it so that summoned golems are resummoned 4 seconds after being killed. They basically never die anyways. And then on top of that, we have Elemancer, which means that summoned golems are immune to elemental damage. We don't have to worry about the resists. They've got a ton of life. I think they have like 70,000 life or something like that. Very, very tanky. We also do use Bastion of Elements just to give us a little bit more defenses from elemental damage, and then we use Shaper of Storms. Shaper of Storms is going to make it so that when we are cycloning on enemies, when we hit them, they get shocked a little bit, which is pretty nice. It's a good damage bonus. There's not really much else to go. You could go like Shaper of Winter if you wanted some defensive layers or something like that, but not too super useful. Shaper of Storms is better. Now, beyond those two golems, that line that says golems grant 4% additional physical damage reduction, what this does is it makes it so that our actual defensive like layers of physical damage, we have 37 base physical damage reduction. And when we pop all of our flasks and such, we're at almost 50% with only 4,200 armor. Now, a lot of people use like Brass Dome on this build, and I honestly don't really see the reason why. I think that they're going into Path of Building and looking at the calcs and seeing that since Brass Dome gives them so much armor, it makes them take less physical damage. But the problem with Path of Building in that regard is that unless you type in like a reasonable hit of physical damage, it kind of lies to you about armor. So if you think that you're taking like no physical damage from using the Brass Dome, you can go into Path of Building, type in a 5,000 physical damage hit, and see that it really doesn't do that much for you. The only thing that it realistically does do is it prevents you from taking extra damage from crits. But you're going to lose some block, you're going to lose some some other things, and I mean, there are other things in here, like you can get just Soul of Solaris and go Nightmare's Omen, take no extra damage from critical strikes if you've taken a critical strike recently. That's probably fine. I mean, I don't think that the Brass Dome is that good. I think that a big life chest piece with +1 active skill gems is just gonna be better. So that's my opinion on it. Now, as for the rest of the gems that we're using, that Summon Chaos Golem is linked with Feeding Frenzy as well as Culling Strike. Feeding Frenzy is going to give us a little bit more damage to our minions. The Chaos Golem will proc it constantly, and Culling Strike will just kill off some bosses when they're down to 10% health, which is pretty nice. Already talked about the links of our Raised Spectre. We have our Divergent Summon Stone Golem. Of note, interestingly, POB says that normal quality Stone Golem is better damage-wise, but I'm not 100% certain because it's really hard to actually see the real damage of this build in Path of Building because it like separates them into different abilities. I'm not 100% certain whether Divergent or Normal is better. I'm using Divergent because it was very cheap this league due to the Divination card, I think it is. And that's linked with Brutality, Melee Physical Damage, Minion Damage, Anomalous Impale, as well as Multi-Strike. Now the reason we're using Anomalous Impale is because it gives us an additional 10% chance to impale enemies on hit, and that plus our Divergent Dread banner, which is boosted up a little bit from all of our +2 levels, and having Generosity linked means that our golems have a 100% chance to impale with just those two things and nothing else. You don't need any cluster jewels, you don't need anything else. Now, speaking of auras, we have Divergent Dread Banner. Divergent gives a little bit additional chance to impale, meaning that they're getting 25, and then that is Generosity boosted. We're also using Pride, which means that enemies that are nearby us are going to be taking a bunch of extra damage, and then we're using Precision. Now, if you are going to be scaling crit, I think the Precision is very good. However, you could probably replace this with something else if you really wanted to. According to Path of Building, they don't need the accuracy, like the golems themselves can hit without the accuracy, but I couldn't really think of anything else that was super useful here. You could probably do Vitality if you wanted to maybe try to keep yourself and your specters alive. You would have to unlink it from this 4-link, or something that you could do if you wanted a little bit more movement speed is you could drop Precision, drop this link here, and you could put in Phase Run. This would make it so that you could put Phase Run on your left click, you can move around a lot faster. So it would be a good way to get moving around and having a little bit better phasing, and you know, you get the stealth and all that other good stuff so that your minions will take all the brunt for you. That's something that you could do. Precision is probably fine. It does give them some crit, which is worthwhile. Now beyond that, we do have Flesh Offering, Cast While Channeling, Fortify, and Cyclone. This is our source of personal Fortify as well as our way to apply our offering. It just means that anytime that we are cycloning around, we can get our offering quite easily. This will also clear corpses for us pretty consistently, and when you're on a boss, you just pop down a Desecrate and then use your Cyclone just for a moment to be able to get your offering going. Makes your minions do a lot more damage. And we do have Convocation. This is very important for keeping your specters alive. This is one of the main pain points gameplay-wise of getting the specters, is that the specters have to kind of be maintained. If they're running around and there's like an ability that the boss does, you gotta Convocate to get them away from that ability. It'll heal them up a little bit, move them towards you. It's useful. Flame Dash is our movement skill, and Desecrate is necessary for getting our specters back and being able to have our Flesh Offering during boss encounters. You could, if you wanted to keep Precision and have Phase Run, you could get one of these rings to be like a slotted ring and just put it in there. That would be something that you can do, but that's pretty much it for all of the links. Now, as for your flasks, you can just use any defensive flask you like. I'm using a Panicked Life Flask just because it seems to be the best one these days. There's not really very many unique flasks that are super useful. If you wanted to go the full crit route and you wanted to go Bottled Faith, you could absolutely do that. It's very expensive, so you know, if you want to pay what, I think Bottled Faith is like 18 Exalt or something right now for just like a marginal increase in damage, it'd be good for your other builds, so you could always do that if you like. Probably not too worthwhile. Now, we're going to do a random tier 16 map. We'll probably do this Maze of the Minotaur. Now, this is players cannot regenerate life. That's not good for our build, so let's see. Also not Temp Chains. We're probably going to roll this a couple of times so we get something decent. Yeah, that's fine. Endurance Shards on hit, Burning Ground, you know, a bunch of stuff that doesn't really matter. But let's take a look at this map. I'll show you how the build actually plays, give you an idea of what it's all about. So the first thing that I do want to show off is going to be whenever we can find a rare mob and we can get the Breath Stealers to proc, I want to show you what these Breath Stealers look like. Here's one right here. Oh, it's an Einhar mob. Of course it is. Why would it be anything else? So if I can see it through all of the different things happening, actually, no, I think that one didn't give one. There they are. So these are the little aura totem things, and you can see it's providing us some nice auras. So anytime that we do kill any kind of rare mob, one of those pops up. Now, this is super helpful for clearing. It's not really useful for most bosses because they don't really have rare mobs, but very, 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 very helpful for clearing. You can even get one of those auras that makes it so that like you and your allies cannot die. That is one of the possible auras. There's pretty much any aura that a normal like random totem in the game can get. Very, very useful, and sometimes in like ritual and things like that, you can get like 15 of those little totems stacked up and you can basically become unkillable, get your own little like personal aura bot. It's pretty nice. As we can kind of see, the build doesn't move super fast. If I was using phase run, it would be a lot faster, but I decided to stick with precision and not really worry too much about getting phase run moving. Now this build does have one major problem with the way that I've currently built it, and that is just that the build kind of dies randomly. If you want all of this damage, you do have to give up on some of your survivability. I could easily push another 1,000 life into this build if I really wanted to, but the main thing that that's going to require is it's going to require more levels. It's going to require just better gear, right? I'm going to have to make another one of these amulets and try to get some life rolled on that. I'm going to have to roll my boots better. I'm going to have to roll my helmet better. I'm just going to have to just do better on everything and level up. So essentially what it came down to is I really didn't feel like spending an insane amount of money just to be able to get a little bit tankier, right? If you really wanted to push this build, then by all means you could do that, but I personally just didn't really feel like it was worthwhile. I kind of wanted to move on to other builds. If you do want to invest the money, the build will be able to do anything that you want it to. Just understand that for the average person, the average map enjoyer, it's probably not the best investment for your money right now. If you're looking for a boss killer, FR totems would probably be a better choice, and if you're looking for a map clearer / like all-around build, Lancing Steel would probably be pretty good. Another one of these episodes coming up for that build quite soon. And there's just better choices if you're really wanting to pump a bunch of money into a build. Like, you could just go Spectres instead and spend all of that money on just an actual, like, SO Spectres or something like that would probably be a better use of your money. This is just one of those builds that I kind of liked back in the day, and I wanted to see if it still worked, and the answer is yes, it does still work. It's just not as efficient as it used to be, but that's pretty much everything in Path of Exile I've noticed at the moment. Bossing is a little bit of an interesting situation. The thing about bossing is that in particular with this build, you might have noticed that there's just like a lot of, there's that cannot die aura. There's just kind of a lot of screen clutter going on because you have all the golems and you have all these crazy effects and the cycloning and the desecrating and all that good stuff. Kind of hard to see what's going on. This build will die if anything hits it. If a boss comes in and just slams you in the face, you're most likely gonna die, and there's not really a ton that you can do about that. Now, pure physical damage, you can actually survive quite well. Everything else, I mean, you've got the Primal Aegis, and that's cool, but most other things are gonna kill you. Now, you can kind of see, I mean, the damage is okay, but it's not amazing by any means. Like, it's respectable for Awakener 8 and Maven, but this level of gear should kind of be annihilating bosses at this point, right? Like, if I've spent 15 Exalted gear, I should be, like, slapping the hell out of these bosses. I shouldn't have to sit here and just let my minions beat on it for, like, 10 minutes, right? Now, that wasn't actually 10 minutes, but you kind of get what I'm saying, right? If you spent 15 Exalt on a Spectre build, you would be melting that boss. With all of that said, I do just kind of feel like unless you particularly really want to play this build, I would say it is better off to just play like a standard SO Spectres build. You're going to get a lot more, you know, bang for your buck out of that minion build. So most likely I'm not going to be doing anything extra. There's going to be no build guide coming with this particular build unless something miraculously changes or we get some massive update to golems in general, which I don't necessarily think is coming. But I kind of wanted to give it a revisit because I think that it did deserve it. It was one of my favorite minion builds of all time, and while it still functions, the changes in 3.15 haven't exactly left it in a perfect state. And that is going to be it for the video. Now, something that I would like to do with this series is that if you do have maybe an option for a build that I've done on one of these, or some interesting ideas for something that maybe I didn't think about, make sure to join my Discord down below, and you can DM me or just, you know, talk in one of the random channels about different ways that this build could be improved, because one of the cool things about Path of Exile that I feel is that there is always somebody out there that's going to figure out something insane, right? It's always just lurking out in the corner. Like, you might just find some random crazy interactions for this build that just makes it completely unstoppable. I wasn't able to find anything that I could realistically invest in and make it work, but you might be able to, so make sure to let me know. So remember guys, like the video if you enjoy this content, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in raid class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.